Have you noticed how many times in the readings since Easter Sunday the disciples and their companions, as it says here, just didn't get it? They were always disbelieving and questioning and too good to be true, I guess. Well, don't forget that they are the church at that time, kind of a small group. I think we're well over 1 billion now, aren't we? But sometimes we still don't get it either. You know, it took the church a long time to get its act together to understand just what God was doing. I mean, it didn't come in a flash of light on Easter Sunday afternoon. They wrestled with this for years, well into the 4th century. They were still arguing and discussing, and the Spirit, of course, we believe, was guiding the church to come to a self-understanding. But it took time. So if you don't get your act together real quick in your life, don't feel discouraged. You're just like the rest of us, whether individuals or institutions. One of the things that they didn't seem to get, St. Augustine mentions this 300 years later in a homily on a Sunday morning, they saw Christ the head, and that whole terminology wasn't even going around in the church then. It was later, 40, 50 years later, that St. Paul starts talking about the body of Christ. Christ is the head and we are the members. But these folks in Easter Sunday afternoon didn't have any clue about that yet. But Augustine did, and he said, these folks, our ancestors in the faith, the first church, recognized the head, Christ, but they didn't recognize the body. All they knew was the head. They didn't understand that they were the body of Christ in the world, down through time. Today, I think sometimes it's the reverse. People don't know Christ because they don't recognize the body either. And always remembering that the body is us. To know Christ, to see the risen Lord, to experience the risen Lord, it is necessary to know the whole Christ. And we are the body of Christ, which puts a tremendous responsibility upon our shoulders that the world may know him. That's why in the last line of the gospel, Jesus sums it all up by saying, you, the little church in front of him, and now the big church in front of him, you are the my witnesses. We are witnesses, how? By telling people? No. By being the body of Christ. And how do you be the body of Christ? John says in the second reading, by obeying Christ's word, his command. And what was his command? It wasn't the 10 Commandments. They still exist. But he said, my new commandment is love one another. And by this all men will know that you are my disciples, and women too. So love is the critical thing in the life of the church, in the life of the body of Christ. To experience the whole Christ, people have to know him in us and through us. Now that's the hard part, isn't it? The love part. I think it was Dostoevsky in the Brothers Karamazov who said, love in reality is a harsh and dreadful thing. Not love in dreams, but love in reality. Because the love that Jesus is talking about here is the love he exemplified in his own life and called us to lay down our lives for each other. And that gets us down to the nitty-gritty of daily life, which is where people will recognize the body of Christ, will recognize Christ in us. So as we proceed through these Eastertide readings, listen carefully to what we're being called to. We're not called to rejoice in something that happened 2,000 years ago. We are being called to be the reality today of what happened 2,000 years ago. To be the visible presence in our world, in our neighborhood, in our parish, in the place where we work, of the risen Christ. Because if people do not see Christ, the body of Christ, they will never see the head, who is Christ. And we are the body that they need to see.